Mindanao is the second largest and southernmost major island in the Philippines. It is also the name of one of the three island groups in the country, consisting of the island of Mindanao and smaller outlying islands. Davao City is the largest city in Mindanao. As of the 2010 census, the island's population itself is 20,281,545 people, while the Mindanao Island Group has 21,968,174 inhabitants. Davao City is the most populous in Mindanao as 1,632,991 population, and the second is Zamboanga City as 861,799 population. The third is Cagayan City as 675,950 population, and followed by General Santos City as 594,446 population as of 2015 census. Parts of southwestern Mindanao Island Group, particularly the provinces of Maguindanao, Basilan, Lanao del Sur, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi, are home to a sizable Muslim population, making the island group, along with Palawan, the only area of the Philippines with a significant Muslim presence. The island has seen a communist insurgency as well as armed Moro separatist movements. Mindanao is considered the food basket of the Philippines. 8 of the top 10 agri-commodities exported from the Philippines come from here. Mindanao is also dubbed with the moniker as the Philippines' Land of Promise. History. Mindanao is named after the Maguindanaons who constituted the largest sultanate historically, and evidence from maps made during the 17th and 18th centuries suggests that the name was used to refer to the island by the powerful natives at the time. Evidence of human occupation dates back tens of thousands of years. In prehistoric times the Negrito people arrived. Sometime around 1500 BC, Austronesian people spread throughout the Philippines and far beyond. Native people of the Maluku Islands refer the island as Maluku Besar. Mindanao Island is also a sacred home of Paramatabantajan, Mabaningandamatu and Arandamabigani, the Meron or native people from Kiranda Ragata Tiongco Pelagian before Islamic Dawa, the largest non-Muslim tribe, and the Subanan tribe, the aborigine of the Zamboanga Peninsula, Zamboanga del Norte, Zamboanga del Sur, Zamboanga Sabugay, Island of Basilan, and northern provinces of Misamis Occidental, Lanao del Norte, and Misamis Oriental. Neolithic and Bronze Age. The Subanan are believed to have established themselves on Mindanao Island during the Neolithic era or New Stone Age, the period in the development of human technology beginning around 10,000 BC according to the ASPRO chronology. The evidence of old stone tools in Zamboanga del Norte may indicate a late Neolithic presence. Burial jars, both earthen and glazed, as well as Chinese celadons, have been found in caves, together with shell bracelets, beads, and gold ornaments. Many of the ceramic objects are from the Yuan and Ming periods. Evidently, there was a long history of trade between the Subanan and the Chinese long before the latter's contact with Islam. Hindu-Buddhist era. In the classic epoch of Philippine history, the people of Mindanao were heavily exposed to Hindu and Buddhist influence and beliefs from Indonesia and Borneo. Indianized Abugid script such as Kawi and Baybayin had been introduced through Sulawesi and Java, and the cultural icons of the sarong, the pudong turban, silk, and batik and knit weaving and dyeing methods introduced. Artifacts found from this era include the golden canara, golden tara, and the Ganesh pendant. These cultural traits passed through Mindanao into the Visayas and Luzon, lost or heavily modified in these areas after the Spanish arrival in the 16th century. In coastal areas, the Hindu-Buddhist cultural revolution was strongest, whereas in interior parts, influences were indigenized into local animist beliefs and customs and appeared more subtly. The Darangan epic of the Maranao people harken back to this era as the most complete local version of the Ramayana. The Maguindanao at this time also had strong Hindu beliefs, evidenced by the Ladya-Luana epic saga that survives to the modern day, albeit highly Islamized from the 17th century onwards. The Rajanate of Butuan, a fully Hindu kingdom mentioned in Chinese records as a vassal state in the 10th century AD, was concentrated along the northeastern coast of the island around Butuan. The coming of Islam happened in the 14th century. The first mosque in the Philippines was built in the mid-14th century in the town of Simunal. The Philippine sultanates of Sulu and Maguindanao were subsequently established in the 15th and 16th centuries, respectively from Hindu-Buddhist Rajanates. In the late 16th to early 17th centuries, the first contact with Spain occurred. By this time, Islam was well established in Mindanao and had started influencing groups on the big islands of the Visayas such as Cebu and as far north as Bohol, and present-day Manila on the island of Luzon. Manila itself once was Muslim when the Sultanate of Brunei annexed it. Spanish arrival. Upon the Spaniards' arrival to the Philippines, they were dismayed to find such a strong Muslim presence on the island, having just expelled the Moors from Spain after centuries of fighting under the Reconquista. In fact, the name Moros was given to the Muslim inhabitants by the Spanish. Caesarea Caroli was the name given by Villalobos to the island of Mindanao when he reached the sea near it. This was named after Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire. Spain was forced to abandon Zamboanga in Mindanao temporarily and to withdraw its soldiers to Manila in 1662 after the Chinese under Coxinga threatened to invade the Spanish Philippines. Modern history. After the Spanish-American War, the Americans fought numerous battles against the Moro. At the start of World War II, Japanese forces defeated Gen. William F. Sharp's forces, including Gen. Gayo, Fort's 81st Division, after a battle which started at Malabang, near Ngandamatu Makada, Lanao, on 29 April 1942, and ended near Ganasi, Lanao, on 10 May 1942. However, Filipino soldiers and local guerrilla fighters were active until liberation at the conclusion of the Battle of Mindanao. The native Moro Muslims and Lumads were supplanted by the first Spanish and American colonization programs, with Christian settlers taking control of key areas and disrupting the Muslims' administrative structures and control over resources. The Americans chose Christian settlers to become officials of settler-populated townships instead of Lumads and Muslims. Due to the activities of the settlers, including logging, the environment has suffered significant damage. Eric S. Casino wrote on the interaction between the Filipino settlers, the Moro Muslim and Lumad natives and the impact on the environment in his book Mindanao Statecraft and Ecology. Moros, Lumads, and settlers across the lowland-highland continuum. The Americans started a colonization program on Mindanao for foreign agricultural companies and Filipino Christian settlers against the native Muslims and non-Muslim Lumads of Mindanao. In order to secure the area with a Christian presence and help the American military assert control over the area once it was conquered, Europeans and Japanese were suggested as potential immigrants along with Filipino Christians by the American General Wood. Davao in Mindanao had a large population of Japanese immigrants who acted as a fifth column, welcoming the Japanese invaders during World War II. These Japanese were hated by the Moros and disliked by the Chinese. The Moros were judged as fully capable of dealing with Japanese fifth colonists and invaders alike. The Moros were to fight the Japanese invaders when they landed at Davao on Mindanao. The Japanese went back to the ships at night to sleep since the Moros struck so much fear into them. Even though the Moros were outnumbered by the Japanese, 90% of Mindanao's people consisted of native Moro Muslims at the start of the 20th century, but the invasion and colonization sponsored by the American and Philippine governments led to Filipino Christian settlers turning into the majority, of almost 75% of the population, with the American colonial government giving the land titles to Christian colonists. Media compared the American conquest of the West from the Native Americans to the Filipino conquest and settlement of Mindanao from the Muslims. The Philippine government, Philippine military and Filipino militias used extremely violent tactics against natives to support the settlers. The government agencies involved in settlement on Mindanao were the National Land Settlement Administration and subsequently the Land Settlement and Development Corporation, followed by the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration. The Americans used the control over property and land laws to let American corporations and Filipino Christian settlers take over Lumad and Moro Muslim resources and land and depriving them of self-governance after eliminating the sovereignty of the Moro sultanates, and ignoring Moro requests for their own independence, with the Philippine government continuing the colonization program after independence, leading to a humongous number of Filipino settlers streaming into Moro territories, and this led to Moros making moves for independence and armed struggle against the Philippines. After 1960, the settlement program turned the Moro Muslims into a minority from the previous majority in Mindanao, similar to what happened in the Indonesian transmigration program where Javanese people were frontier areas of settled with ethnic Maduris and Javanese people. The native Moros became victims to land grabs by Filipino Christian settlers. Severe violence between native Muslims and Christian settlers erupted due to the influx of Christian colonists, companies and other entities seeking to exploit new land on Mindanao who engaged in land grabbing. Lumad and Muslim interests were ignored by the state-sponsored colonization program led by the National Land Settlement Administration, which provided benefits for the colonists and made no consideration for the Muslims. Moro Muslims are just 17% of Mindanao's population, whereas prior to the colonization program initiated by the governments of the Philippines, they had been a massive majority, and the colonization and land grabs led to the current violent conflict, with private companies and Filipino colonists from the Visayas and Luzon taking lands from Moro clans, with the Philippine government issuing land titles to settlers and ignoring Moro ownership of the lands since they declared Moro land as public lands. Massive settlement by Filipino Christian colonists continued after independence was granted and rule passed to Christian Filipinos from the Americans, and land disputes the Christian settlers had with the Muslim and tribal natives broke out in violence. Eventually the colonization, along with the Jabada massacre, led to the formation of the Moro National Liberation Front and Moro armed insurgency against Philippine rule. The Philippine government encouraged Filipino Christian settlers in Mindanao to form militias called Ilaga to fight the Moros. The Ilaga engaged in massacres and atrocities and were responsible for Manili massacre of 65 Moro Muslim civilians in a mosque on June 1971, including women and children. The Ilaga also engaged in cannibalism, cutting off the body parts of the victims to eat in rituals. The Ilaga settlers were given the sarcastic nickname as an acronym, the Ilonggo Land Grabbers Association. The American and Philippine colonization placed Filipino Christian settlers on Muslim lands and resulted in violence. The potential for Moro independence was deliberately targeted by the colonization of Moroland with Christians by the Philippine government, since the Moros protested against Mindanao being in the Philippines upon independence in 1946 from the United States. The Muslim South in Mindanao became flooded by Christian colonists supported by the Philippine government, and Moros are now 20% of the population, down from 40% in 1976, down from a previous figure of 98%. The Moros objected to being included in the Philippines upon independence from America and rejected the identity of Filipino. After 7 decades of settler-biased land tenure laws, changing of traditional and cultural places to Roman Catholic saints' names, and even names of a general bringing in settlers, putting the crucifix on top of Mindanao mountains, formation of religious-based settler militia called Ilaga led by officers of the Philippine Constabulary, connivance of Philippine armed forces with the Ilaga as a tool for counter-insurgency resulted in full-blown insurgency led mostly by the Moro, Lumads and few impoverished settlers. Cycles of displacement that have affected central Mindanao for several decades have peaked during the first decade of the 20th century, after decades of low-intensity conflict in Maguindanao between 1976 and 2000. President Estrada's all-out war strategy declared in 2000 led to the displacement of more than 930,000 individuals. The decade that followed has been marked by a cycle of violence and resumption of peace talks between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front that sought to establish an independent Islamic state in Maguindanao. The fighting led to several periods of mass population displacement at the very latest, even until the term of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, displacing another 150,000 individuals, mostly of Moro and Lumad communities. Between 2000 and 2010, 4 out of 10 households reported having experienced displacement. 29% reported displacement caused by armed groups movements, 9% identified ridos, and 9% identified other causes, such as economic displacement and natural disasters. Armed groups movements were by far the most frequent cause of displacement and also the most damageable. Some provinces were more affected than others, mostly of the Moro, as they are the most active in resistance to what they perceived to be an extension of Spanish colonialism now perpetuated by the hands of the Philippine government. Areas that suffered most damage and displacement are Maguindanao, Lanao del Norte and Lanao del Sur. Other forms of violence have also been prevalent. For example, in Maguindanao, 45% of the total population reported the destruction of their home. Other forms of violence reported in that province include the destruction of goods, being attacked by someone with a weapon, witness looting, and witness killing. A number of livelihood intervention projects from organizations such as USAID and the Emergency Livelihood Assistance Program have been beneficial in the reconstruction of Mindanao. Geography. Mindanao is the second largest island in the Philippines at 104,630 square kilometers, and is the 8th most populous island in the world. The island of Mindanao is larger than 125 countries worldwide, including the Netherlands, South Korea, Austria, Portugal, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Ireland. The island is mountainous, and is home to Mount Apo, the highest mountain in the country. Mindanao is surrounded by 4 seas: the Sulu Sea to the west, the Philippine Sea to the east, and the Celebes Sea to the south, and the Mindanao Sea to the north. Of all the islands of the Philippines, Mindanao shows the greatest variety of physiographic development: high, rugged, faulted mountains, almost isolated volcanic peaks, high rolling plateaus, and broad, level, swampy plains are found there. The Mindanao Island Group is an arbitrary grouping of islands in southern Philippines which comprises the Mindanao mainland, the Sulu archipelago to the southwest, consisting of the major islands of Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi, plus the outlying islands of Camigan, Dinagat, Siargao, and Samal in other areas. The mountains of Mindanao can be conveniently grouped into 10 ranges, including both complex structural mountains and volcanoes. The structural mountains on the extreme eastern and western portions of the island show broad exposures of Mesozoic rock with ultrabasic rocks at the surface in many places along the east coast. Other parts of the island consists mainly of Cenozoic and Quaternary volcanic sedimentary rocks. Paralleling the east coast, from Billas Point in Surigao del Norte to Cape Agustin in southeast Davao, is a range of complex mountains known in the northern portion as the Duarte Mountains. This range is low and rolling in its central portion. A proposed road connecting Bislig on the east coast with the Agusan River would pass through a 16 km broad saddle across the mountains at a maximum elevation of less than 250 meters, while the existing east-west road from Lianga, 30 miles north of Bislig, reaches a maximum elevation of only 450 meters. The Duarte Mountains, north of these low points, are considerably higher and more rugged, reaching an elevation of 2,012 meters in Mount Hilong, 17 miles along the eastern portion of Cabadbaran City. The southern portion of this east coast range is broader and even more rugged than the northern section. In eastern Davao, several peaks rise above 2,600 meters and one mountain rises to 2,910 meters. The east-facing coastal regions of Davao and Surigao del Sur are marked by a series of small coastal lowlands separated from each other by rugged forelands which extend to the water's edge. Offshore are numerous coral reefs and tiny islets. This remote and forbidding coast is made doubly difficult to access during the months from October to March by the heavy surf driven before the northeast trade winds. A few miles offshore is found the Mindanao Philippine Deep. This ocean trench, reaching measured depths of 34,696 feet, is the third deepest trench on the Earth's surface. A second north-south range extends along the western borders of the Agusan and Davao provinces from Camigan Island in the north to Tinaca Point in the south. This range is mainly structural in origin, but it also contains at least 3 active volcano peaks. In the central and northern portions of this range, there are several peaks between 2,000 and 2,600 meters, and here the belt of mountains is about 30 miles across. West of Davao City are 2 inactive volcanoes, Mount Alamo at 2,893 meters and Mount Apo at 2,964 meters, which is the highest point in the Philippines and dominates the skyline. South of Mount Apo, this central mountain belt is somewhat lower than it is to the north, with peaks averaging only 1,100 to 1,800 meters. In western Mindanao, a range of complex structural mountains forms the long, hand-like Zamboanga Peninsula. These mountains, reaching heights of only 1,200 meters, are not as high as the other structural belts in Mindanao. In addition, there are several places in the Zamboanga Mountains where small intermountain basins have been created, with some potential for future agricultural development. The northeastern end of this range is marked by the twin peaks of the now extinct volcano Mount Malandang, which rise behind Ozami's city to a height of 2,425 meters. Mount Dapia is the highest mountain in the Zamboanga Peninsula, reaching a height of 2,617 meters. Meanwhile, Batorampon Point is the highest mountain of the southernmost end of the peninsula, reaching the height of only 1,335 meters. It is located in the boundary of Zamboanga City. A series of volcanic mountains is found near Lake Lanao in a broad arc through Lanao del Sur, northern Cotabato and western Bukidnon provinces. At least 6 of the 20-odd peaks in this area are active, and several are very impressive as they stand in semi-isolation. The Buig Peaks, with the 4 crater lakes, are easily seen from Cotabato. Mount Ragang, an active volcano cone reaching 2,815 meters, is the most isolated, while the greatest height is reached by Mount Kitanglad at 2,889 meters. In southwestern Cotabato, still another range of volcanic mountains is found, this time paralleling the coast. These mountains have a maximum extent of 110 miles from northwest to southeast and measure some 30 miles across. One of the well-known mountains here is Mount Parker, whose almost circular crater lake measures 1.25 miles in diameter and lies 300 meters below its 2,040 meters summit. Mount Matutam is a protected area and is considered as one of the major landmarks of South Cotabato Province. A second important physiographic division of Mindanao is the series of upland plateaus in Bukidnon and Lanao del Sur provinces. These plateaus are rather extensive and almost surround several volcanoes in this area. The plateaus are made up of basaltic lava flows interbedded with ash and volcanic tuff. Near their edges, the plateaus are cut by deep canyons, and at several points spectacular waterfalls drop to the narrow coastal plain. These falls hold considerable promise for development of hydroelectric energy. Indeed, one such site at Maria Cristina Falls has already become a major producer, because the rolling plateaus lie at an elevation averaging 700 meters above sea level. They offer relief from the often oppressive heat of the coastal lowlands. Lake Lanao occupies the major portion of one such plateau in Lanao del Sur. This largest lake on Mindanao and second in the country is roughly triangular in shape with an 18-mile-long base, having a surface at 780 meters above sea level, and being rimmed on the east, south and west by a series of peaks reaching 2,300 meters. The lake provides a scenic grandeur and pleasant temperature seldom equaled in the country. Mirawi City, at the northern tip of the lake, is bisected by the Agus River, which feeds the Maria Cristina Falls. Another of Mindanao's spectacular waterfall sites is located in Malabang, 15 miles south of Lake Lanao. Here, the Jose Abad Santos Falls present one of the nation's scenic wonders at the gateway to a 200-hectare national park development. The Limansudan Falls, with an approximate height of 800 feet, is the highest waterfalls in the Philippines. It is located at Iligan City. Mindanao contains 2 large inland lowland areas, the valleys of the Agusan and Mindanao rivers in Agusan and Cotabato provinces, respectively. There is some indication that the Agusan Valley occupies a broad syncline between the Central Mountains and the East Coast Mountains. This valley measures 110 miles from south to north and varies from 20 to 30 miles in width. 35 miles north of the head of Davao Gulf lies the watershed between the Agusan and the tributaries of the Libuganon River, which flows to the Gulf. The elevation of this divide is well under 200 meters, indicating the almost continuous nature of the lowland from the Mindanao Sea on the north to the Davao Gulf. The Rio Grande de Mindanao and its main tributaries, the Catasan and the Pulangi, form a valley with a maximum length of 120 miles and a width which varies from 12 miles at the river mouth to about 60 miles in central Cotabato. The southern extensions of this Cotabato Valley extend uninterrupted across a 350 meters watershed from Ilana Bay on the northwest to Sarangani Bay on the southeast. Other lowlands of a coastal nature are to be found in various parts of Mindanao. Many of these are tiny isolated pockets, as along the northwest coast of Zamboanga. In other areas such as the Davao Plain, these coastal lowlands are as much as 16 kilometers wide and several times that length. From Dipolog City eastward along the northern coast of Mindanao almost to Butuan City extends a rolling coastal plain of varying width. In Misamis Occidental, the now dormant Mount Malandang has created a lowland averaging 13 kilometers in width. Shallow Panquil Bay divides this province from Lanao del Norte and is bordered by low-lying, poorly drained lowlands and extensive mangroves. In Misamis Oriental, the plain is narrower and in places almost pinched at by rugged fallens which reach to the sea. East of Cagayan-de-Oro, a rugged peninsula extends well into the Mindanao Sea. Administrative divisions. The island is covered by 6 administrative regions, 22 provinces, and 30 cities.